All right, welcome to the deep dive. I know you're all here because you want to get right to the heart of complex topics. And today, we're diving deep into cybersecurity, specifically the world of open source hacking tools. Think of this as your crash course to understanding a crucial piece of the modern digital defense puzzle.
That's it. You sent over this document, Open Source Hacking Tools, top100.pdf, and we've boiled it down to the need-to-know info. Our goal today, to give you a solid grasp of these tools, what they can do, how they're grouped, and why they're essential for anyone, really, who wants to understand the cybersecurity landscape today.
So let's start with the basics. When we talk about software being open source, what does that actually mean?
You can think of it like this. The recipe, the underlying code that makes the software tick is out in the open, freely available. Anyone can check it out, tinker with it, even share their modified version with others. This openness is really key because it allows for a global community, developers, security experts to constantly look over that code, spot weaknesses, and make things better.
So it's like having a massive team of quality control experts constantly reviewing and improving a product.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Okay, so now, when we talk about hacking tools, especially in the context of ethical hacking, what are we really talking about here?
Right, so these are specialized software applications. They're designed to interact with computer systems, networks, to find potential security holes, vulnerabilities. That ethical part is really important. We're talking about using these tools with permission authorization to find those vulnerabilities so they can be patched up before someone with bad intentions finds them. It's like a security audit, but for your digital infrastructure.
Exactly, finding the weak spots before the bad guys do.
Exactly.
Now, what makes these open source hacking tools stand out? What advantages do they have over proprietary tools? The ones where the code is kept secret.
Well, for one, the transparency is a huge plus. Because the code is open, you can actually see what the tool is doing, understand how it works. That builds trust and also, drives a massive community effort to make those tools better. Plus, you often have the ability to customize these tools to fit your specific needs, and they're generally more cost-effective, which is always nice.
Okay, so big picture now. What does this world of open source hacking tools actually look like?
It is a vast and incredibly diverse ecosystem, to say the least. The sheer volume of tools available, it can be pretty overwhelming, especially at first glance.
Yeah, I can imagine.
To make sense of it all, it's helpful to categorize these tools based on their primary function, what they're mainly used for. The source you provided actually does a pretty good job of this. They group the tools into categories that closely align with the different phases of a typical penetration test.
So it's like a roadmap for assessing security.
Exactly.
What are some of those key categories then?
So we have things like network scanning and discovery. That's the first step, figuring out what's on a network. Then you have vulnerability analysis, finding the weak points in those systems. Web application security is huge these days, focusing specifically on, online applications. We also have tools for wireless security, password cracking, and then there are exploitation frameworks. Think of those like toolkits for actually leveraging the vulnerabilities you found. Digital forensics and incident response tools, those help you analyze what happened after a security incident. And finally, you have information gathering and OSINT. That stands for open source intelligence, super important for initial reconnaissance and building a picture of your target.
Sounds like a pretty comprehensive arsenal for anyone serious about cybersecurity. Why have these open source tools become so essential in cybersecurity today?
Well, there are several key reasons for that. First, security teams use these tools to get inside the mind of an attacker to understand the tactics and techniques that malicious actors might use. So it's a proactive approach, anticipating threats, understanding potential attack paths, and as you mentioned, for OSINT, gathering publicly available information to understand an organization's security posture. These tools are absolutely indispensable.
It's not just the tools themselves, is it? There's a whole community and support system behind them.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. The open source community creates this incredibly powerful environment for collaboration. You get rapid bug fixes, continuous development to address new threats, and a ton of freely available resources, detailed documentation, active user forums, things like that.
So let's say you come across a tool with a really active, engaged community. That's a good sign, right?
Exactly. It usually means that the tool is well maintained, up to date, and reliable.
Let's dig into some specific examples within these categories. Maybe we can start with network scanning and discovery.
Sure.
And the tool that immediately jumps to mind there is Nmap, right?
Right. Nmap, short for network mapper, it's truly a cornerstone tool in this space. People use it for all sorts of tasks, from basic port scanning, which is basically checking which network ports are open on a system, to detailed host discovery, service detection, figuring out, what software and versions are running on those systems. What makes it particularly powerful is the advanced scripting engine called NSE. This allows you to automate tasks in really flexible ways. It's not just about simple scanning. You can do some really sophisticated things with Nmap.
And I understand it's pretty much platform agnostic.
Yes, it runs on just about any operating system you can think of, which is another reason why it's so popular. Operates under the MPSL license and is used for things like detailed network inventory and comprehensive security audits. And, for those who prefer a more visual approach, there's Nmap. It's essentially a graphical interface for Nmap. We should also mention Masscan, especially if you need to scan a very large number of targets very quickly. And there's ARPing, which uses ARP packets to probe for active hosts on a network.
Now, vulnerability analysis, what are some of the key open source tools in that area?
Well, OpenVAS is definitely a big player. It's a comprehensive vulnerability scanner, comes with a huge database of tests to identify a wide range of security weaknesses. It has tons of configuration options, which is great for advanced users, and it benefits from a really active community that keeps that vulnerability database up to date. It's licensed under the GPL. Then you have Nikto, which specializes in scanning web servers for vulnerabilities, so it focuses on finding things like misconfigurations, outdated software, things like that. Also operates under the GPL v2 license. And then there are tools like Arachne, Skipfish, and Wapiti, all designed for scanning web applications.
So focusing specifically on web application security, are there any other open source tools that really stand out?
Absolutely. OWASP VASAPE, that's the Z-Attack proxy, a project of the Open Web Application Security Project. It's very popular, actively developed, and, it's really interesting because it can work as both a proxy, so you can intercept and analyze web traffic in real time, and as a standalone automated scanner, crawling through web applications looking for vulnerabilities. It's licensed under the Apache License 2.0. Then you have SQLmap, which is specifically designed for automating the detection and exploitation of SQL injection vulnerabilities. It's incredibly powerful, supports a ton of different database systems, and, it goes beyond just finding the vulnerability. It can actually adapt its attacks based on the database it finds. In some cases, you can even read and write files on the server using SQLmap. It operates under the GPL v2 license. And we can't forget about Burp Suite Community Edition. The Pro version is commercial, but the free Community Edition still has some great features, especially the proxy functionality. That's crucial for in-depth web app security assessments. Think of the proxy in OSP Zavesh and Burp Suite like a postal inspector sitting between your browser and the web server. They can examine and even tamper with the mail.
Okay. What about wireless networks? What are the go-to open source tools for wireless security assessments?
The gold standard in this area is air cracking. It's basically a suite of command line tools that people use for a whole range of wireless security tasks. Everything from capturing Wi-Fi network traffic to attempting to crack WEP and WPAP E2 encryption keys. It does this by, for example, launching deauthentication attacks that momentarily disconnects devices from the network, forcing them to reconnect, and in that process, air cracking can capture the handshake, which it needs for cracking.
Oh, interesting.
It also supports packet injection, which is important for active testing. It's compatible with a wide range of hardware and operating systems. It has a mixed licensing model. Another tool worth mentioning is Kismet. Kismet acts as both a wireless network detector and an intrusion detection system. It works passively, sniffing out networks and potentially malicious activity.
All right, let's talk passwords. Passwords are often the weakest link in security. What open source tools do people use for password cracking during ethical hacking engagements?
Well, John the Ripper, or JTR for short, is a classic, very versatile password cracking tool. It can use various methods like dictionary attacks, where it tries a list of common passwords, or brute force attacks, where it systematically tries every possible combination of characters. It's smart, too. It can automatically figure out what type of password hash it's dealing with, and it supports a huge number of encryption algorithms. It's available under a dual licensing option. Another one is Hashcat. Hashcat is all about speed. It uses the power of your graphics card, your GPU, to accelerate password recovery. It supports an enormous number of hashing algorithms, and it has some very advanced cracking modes. It's licensed under the very permissive MIT license. For generating lists of potential passwords to use with those tools, there are tools like Crunch and CWL, and if you want to systematically try different username and password combinations against various network services, there's Hydra.
Now, let's talk about simulating more sophisticated attacks. What about these exploitation frameworks? What are the key open source options in that area?
The big one here is the Metasploit framework. It's this really comprehensive platform that people use for vulnerability research, developing exploit code, and conducting penetration tests. It has a huge, ever-growing collection of pre-written exploits and modules for all sorts of tasks. And what's really insightful about Metasploit is its modular design. You can seamlessly chain together different modules, like using Nmap to find a vulnerability and then feeding that information directly into Metasploit to launch an exploit. It's really powerful for orchestrating complex attack simulations. It's licensed under the BSD 3-clause license. For those who prefer a graphical interface, there's Armitage, which sits on top of Metasploit and makes it a bit easier to use, especially for collaborative red team exercises. And when you need detailed information about known software vulnerabilities, the exploit database is your go-to resource.
Okay, let's shift gears now and talk about what happens after a potential security breach. What open source tools are essential for digital forensics and incident response?
Well, Wireshark, the one we talked about earlier for network analysis, it's also really valuable in forensics. It helps you dig deep into captured network traffic to figure out exactly what happened. It has a really powerful filtering capability so you can sift through tons of data and pinpoint suspicious activity. It's licensed under the GPLv2 license. Then you have Autopsy. Autopsy is specifically designed for digital forensics. It's a platform for analyzing all sorts of digital data sources, disk images, memory dumps to piece together the events of an incident. It's licensed under the Apache License 2.0. Then there's OSSEC, which is a host-based intrusion detection system. It does real-time analysis of system logs. It checks the integrity of important files to make sure they haven't been tampered with, looking for signs of unauthorized changes. It's licensed under the GPLv2. Security Onion is a specialized Linux distribution that's built for threat hunting and security monitoring. It bundles together a bunch of tools like OSSE into one platform that's easy to deploy. It uses its own custom license. And for quick data analysis and decoding during incident response, there's a really cool web-based tool called Cybersecurity.
Now, gathering information, open source intelligence, or OSINT, seems more crucial than ever in today's threat landscape. What open source tools are really important for this?
Maltego, especially the community edition, it's a really powerful tool for visualizing the relationships between different pieces of information that you gather from public sources. For example, you can plug in a domain name and it'll map out, email addresses, IP addresses, other related data showing you connections that you might not have seen otherwise. It's really good for understanding a target's digital footprint. Then there's Spiderfoot, which is all about automating OSINT gathering. It pulls in data from a ton of different public sources. The Harvester is great for collecting email addresses and subdomains associated with an organization. Recon is a framework for web reconnaissance, lets you automate all sorts of information gathering tasks. And Amass is really good for DNS enumeration and mapping out network infrastructure. We should also mention TOSINT for gathering intelligence from Telegram and Bad DNS for detecting potential subdomain takeover vulnerabilities.
Okay, so let's say an attacker has gained access to a system. What open source tools are commonly used to maintain that access and carry out post-exploitation activities?
Netcat is a classic one. It's a basic networking tool, very versatile, often used to create what we call reverse shells, which basically give you command line access to a compromised system. It's also used for transferring files. Then you have PowerShell Empire, a post-exploitation framework specifically designed for Windows environments. It has modules for all sorts of things like privilege escalation, lateral movement, moving from one system to another within a network. CrackMapExec is another great tool for penetration testing in Windows and Active Directory environments. It automates a lot of the common post-exploitation tasks. And then you have tools like Evil1RM, Liglong, and Responder, each specializing in different aspects of maintaining access and moving laterally within a network.
Wow, it seems like there's an open source tool for pretty much every aspect of cybersecurity. And the document you sent me also mentions other specialized tools, even entire operating systems geared towards security work.
You're right. The open source cybersecurity ecosystem is massive. You have entire Linux distributions, operating systems designed for penetration testing. Kali Linux, Parrot Security OS, Backbox Linux, and Cyborg Hawk. They all come preloaded with a whole bunch of these tools. And then there are more specialized tools, things like Kunai for threat hunting, Beelzebub for setting up honeypots to lure in attackers and analyze their behavior, and just tons of other tools for specific security needs. It really shows you how much innovation is happening in this space.
Okay, let's zoom in on some of these leading tools now and get a better understanding of what makes it so effective. We talked about Nmap earlier, but what are some of the more advanced things it can do that make it so indispensable?
Well, Nmap can do more than just identify open ports. It can actually do service version detection. It tries to figure out the specific software and versions that are running on those ports. This is crucial because, well, you need to know if those versions have known vulnerabilities. And as I mentioned earlier, its NSE scripting engine, that's the network scripting engine, lets you automate some really complex tasks. You can go beyond just finding a vulnerable service. You can actually use scripts to automatically test for exploits, prioritize risks, and all sorts of things. It's incredibly versatile.
And then there's the Metasploit framework. You talked about how vast it is, but what are some of the key features that make it such a powerful platform?
I think it's the modularity that really makes it stand out. It's built around these different modules, exploits the code that actually takes advantage of vulnerability payloads. That's the code that runs on the target system after the exploit works in coders to try and evade security software, all sorts of things. And it integrates really well with Nmap. You can actually scan a network with Nmap and then pull those results directly into Metasploit to start launching relevant exploits. It can be a bit overwhelming for beginners because of its sheer size, but for running well-known exploits, it's actually pretty straightforward.
Okay. We talked about Wireshark for network traffic analysis. What makes it so essential for security pros?
Its ability to capture network traffic at a really granular level and then let you filter and search through all that data using very specific criteria. That's crucial for understanding network communications and spotting anything unusual. It understands a huge number of network protocols, and it can even decrypt traffic that's encrypted using common protocols like TLS. Now, it's a passive tool, meaning it just observes traffic that's already flowing, but the depth of analysis it provides is just incredible, both for understanding normal network behavior and for investigating suspicious activity.
OSZAP sounds like it should be in every web app security professional's toolkit. What makes it so special?
Well, it works as both an intercepting proxy and an automated vulnerability scanner, so that's a big plus. You can use the proxy to manually inspect and even modify web traffic, which is essential for really understanding how a web application works and finding complex vulnerabilities. The automated scanner can quickly crawl through an application and check for all sorts of common security flaws. It also has a very user-friendly interface, and it benefits from a really active community that's always adding new features and vulnerability checks.
We touched on SQL injection earlier. How does SQL Map handle that vulnerability so effectively?
SQL Map is all about SQL injection, and it does it extremely well. It basically automates the entire process of finding and exploiting SQL injection flaws in web applications. It supports a wide range of databases and different injection techniques, and it's smart enough to adapt its approach based on the specific database it finds. And in some cases, if the exploit is successful, it can actually give you complete control over the database, which just shows you how dangerous these vulnerabilities can be.
Air cracking is kind of the go-to for wireless network auditing, right? What are some of its core capabilities?
Yeah, air cracking is a suite of tools for assessing Wi-Fi network security. What it does is it captures wireless traffic and tries to crack the encryption keys. It's really good at cracking older, less secure protocols like WEP and WPA2. It has a command line interface, which makes it really powerful for scripting and automating tasks, though its effectiveness against WPA3, the latest standard, is still evolving.
Now, for password cracking, we have John the Ripper and Hashcat. What are the key differences and strengths of each?
John the Ripper, it's known for its versatility. It supports a bunch of different password cracking techniques, dictionary attacks, brute force, single word attacks, and it can figure out what type of password hash it's dealing with. Hashcat, on the other hand, it's all about speed. It uses your GPU to try a massive number of password combinations really, really quickly. It's very good for brute force attacks against even complex password hashes.
Kali Linux is a name that always comes up in cybersecurity discussions. Why is it so popular?
Kali Linux is a Debian-based Linux distribution. It comes preloaded with hundreds of penetration testing and security auditing tools, including many of the open source tools we've been talking about. It's a ready-made environment for security professionals, so they don't have to spend time downloading and configuring all the individual tools.
And Security Onion offers a slightly different focus, right?
Yeah, more towards network security monitoring and threat detection.
Exactly. Security Onion is a Linux distribution specifically built for threat hunting, intrusion detection, and security monitoring. It combines a bunch of powerful open source tools like Suricata, Zeek, and OSCC into a single platform. It makes it much easier to deploy and manage a comprehensive security monitoring system.
And what about OSCC, which focuses more on host-based security?
Yeah, OT is a host-based intrusion detection system, or HIDs. It does real-time monitoring of what's happening on individual computer systems. Key features include log analysis to spot suspicious activity, file integrity monitoring to detect unauthorized changes to files, and rootkit detection to find hidden malware. It's also really scalable and can be used on various operating systems.
Now, even the free community edition of Maltego seems like it can be a valuable asset for OSINT.
Yeah, Maltego is all about visualizing the connections between different pieces of information that you find from public sources. That visual representation can reveal patterns and links that you might miss if you're just looking at lists of data. It's great for understanding a target's online presence and potential attack vectors.
Now, Scapy allows you to do some pretty low-level stuff with network packets. Why is that capability so important?
So Scapy is a Python-based tool that lets you create, send, capture, and analyze network packets. It gives you very granular control over network interactions. That's really important for things like network discovery, testing protocols, and even simulating specific types of network attacks. You can essentially build your own custom networking tools with Scapy.
And lastly, Burp Suite Community Edition. Even though it's the free version, it still packs a punch for web application security testing.
Absolutely. Its proxy functionality is a must-have for anyone doing web app security work. You can intercept and examine all the HTTPS traffic that goes between your browser and a web server. It gives you a lot of insight into how the application communicates, and it helps you find those sneaky vulnerabilities that automated scanners might miss.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's pretty clear that open source hacking tools are incredibly important in cybersecurity. What are your final thoughts on their significance and where this landscape is heading?
These tools really form the foundation for ethical hacking, penetration testing, and all sorts of cybersecurity research. The open source approach just makes sense here. It drives rapid innovation through community contributions. The transparency builds trust. And the cost effectiveness means that even small organizations and individuals can access powerful security testing capabilities.
And looking ahead, I think we'll see these tools becoming even more integrated with things like AI and machine learning. I think we'll see more cloud-native security solutions built around these open source tools. And of course, we'll see the open source community continuing to drive innovation in threat intelligence. These tools are essential, both for understanding the threat landscape and for effectively defending against it.
And I think it's super important to emphasize that these are powerful tools. They have to be used responsibly, ethically, always with proper authorization, and within the boundaries of the law.
100% agree.
So, as we close out this deep dive, you should have a much better grasp of this vast world of open source hacking tools and why they matter.
They're vital for understanding and tackling those ever-evolving cybersecurity challenges.
Now, here's a final thought to leave you with. How does this open, collaborative approach that defines open source development, how does that contribute to the speed and effectiveness of cybersecurity innovation? And what role could you, even as an individual, play in this community?
Yeah, that's something to think about for sure.
We encourage you to explore any of the specific tools or categories that pique your interest during this deep dive. You now have a solid foundation to go deeper into this critical part of our digital world. Thanks for joining us.